Welcome back to Unraveled Game Thoughts. This is my 2024 top 10 games. I did one back in August, and after a couple more months, I have, I think, a little bit more comprehensive top 10 list for 2024. But it is a revision from my previous one, and there's a good chance I'll do one next year after I've played a couple more. Off the top of my head, I haven't had a chance to play Arcs yet. That is still on its way. I haven't had a chance to play SETI yet. That is one I'd really like to get to the table. Those are the two I can think of off the top of my head that I feel like will potentially have a place in my top 10 for this year. So, that being said, let's start off with number 10. Oh, I don't even have that behind me. It is River Valley Glassworks. This is on Board Game Arena. I played it several times on there. Got to play it once in person about a month ago, and I enjoyed the game more than I thought I would. Playing online, there were a couple of rules I didn't quite understand. I was able to play the game, but I didn't realize how the shape of your glass could really mitigate the areas on the board that you would take glass from. In this particular game, you have various shapes of glass and colors of glass, and there's a certain rarity level to the different colors, and the point system is another aspect that I didn't fully grok until I'd actually seen it in front of me in person, and this would never have made my list until I kind of conceptualized that point system, because you could score in more ways than I realized with having rows completed versus having columns completed, which is pretty much how I was playing before, is just trying to complete a column as far down to the right side of my board as I could. The game is very tactile. The glass pieces are fun. They clink in the bag really nicely. It's a nice, enjoyable abstract puzzle. It is my number 10. It's not the game that I see myself necessarily going back to a lot. My family has not played this game, and once they have an opportunity to play it, then there might be a little bit more potential for it to hit my game closet. For now, it's a fun game that I'll play on BGA and probably won't be playing too much in person unless I'm playing at a friend's house, which I would. This is definitely one. It's probably in the low sevens for me. A game I'd like playing. I will play it almost anytime somebody puts it out. I may even occasionally ask for it if I happen to be somewhere where someone has a copy of the game. But I wouldn't necessarily seek to put it out myself, because I have a lot of other games that fit a similar profile. If you're a fan of something like Azul, it kind of probably falls into that ballpark. This has a little bit more theme than I would say Azul does, but I wouldn't necessarily call the mechanics thematic. It just has a nice overlay when you're playing the game, and it's a different asymmetric puzzle to play with. So that's my number 10. My number 9 is Draft and Write Records. This is by Inside Up Games, Bruno Maciel and Pedro Alberto. This is a draft and write game. You're going to be drafting cards. Those cards are going to essentially trigger one of 3 different areas on your sheet. I actually laminated this so that I don't have to use these sheets over and over again. I can just use a dry erase until it gets, I guess, overly dry erased, and I can just laminate another one. But this will make it last longer. But when you put band members in your band area, or you add to your schedule, or add to your assets for those different areas, but whenever you decide on, you get cards handed to you by your opponent or your initial set of cards, you're going to pick one, and it's going to go in one of those 3 spots, and that's going to trigger other bonuses around your board, either your tour, or this is kind of an end game multiplier. And these are some other, kind of unlocks more bonuses. It's just a bonus triggering game. The the records, the band theme is, for all intents and purposes, a pasted on theme, but it's a fun theme. And I like that the synergy that you can create with the band members creates more bonuses that you trigger. It's pretty fun, and I've played this a multitude of times on Board Game Arena. And I almost not long after playing it, I had to go get a copy because I found it to be that entertaining. But yeah, this is a great game for up to 6 players. I think it is. It's pretty easy to get to the table. It doesn't take long to play, and it probably not that hard. Not really that hard to teach because all you're doing is showing people how the bonuses trigger. Number, what do we have? 8. Number 8 was a Garfield Games, Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald. This is inventors of the South Tigris. I wasn't 100% sure this was going to make my list, but it's fun, and I've played it twice now, and it offers a nice array of interesting mechanics. I am not sure where I rank it in all the Garfield games. Even in the South Tigris series, I don't know where it ultimately will land. I think Scholars and Wayfarers are going to be a little bit ahead. I think Paladins is ahead. I think this might end up being somewhere around where I rank Viscounts, probably in my 40 to 50 range. But it is an interesting point and mechanical system. Most of the mechanics are stuff you've seen in other Euro games. You're building a little bit of a tableau workshop that when you use your dice in the workshop, the bigger your workshop is, the more you're triggering, the more you're getting out of it, assuming you build it well. And there is a plethora of different bonuses you can trigger around the board. You're largely either working toward developing, inventing something, building an invention, or publishing an invention. You can also test inventions, which will add some other bonuses out on the board, may help you get workshop tiles. But those are the 3 things that you're largely doing. And you're doing that with other players. It's not a co-op, but someone might invent something that then you build and another person publishes. It's sort of a trickle down effect, and at the end of the game, but based on those 3 main actions, not as much to testing, you're going to score some stuff. Now the testing isn't going to score you points, but if you have built an invention, I think it's if you either built or if you've invented something, you're going to get points for the number of people that tested it. I can't remember which one is the one that gives you the points. But it's a long game. I'd say 3 hours is probably what it's going to take for a 4-player game, even with everybody knowing how to play. You might be able to whittle that down to 2, but there's some good meaty decisions to make from turn to turn, and there are probably a number of options you could have on a given turn. You could probably rule some things out based on your dice. But this, again, like Scholars, like Wayfarers, there's some dice manipulation going on in the game, but this is not a dice rolling game. Neither is Wayfarers or Scholars. Neither one of those are dice rolling games. The dice just determine your actions, and you can kind of influence your dice in different ways in all 3 of these games. This one's not much different than that, but it's fun. It's enjoyable. If you haven't played it, I would suggest trying it. There's no place to play it online, so you just have to find somebody with a copy of this. But it is probably worth at least getting to the table to see you like it. I love Garfield games, but this is probably the one I'm not quite sure about. So we'll see in the coming years with more plays how that works out. But that does bring me to my number 7, which is another Garfield game, and that is Ezra and Nehemiah. And this one is actually higher up than Inventors for me. Came out earlier in 2024. It is kind of similar to Paladins. if I was trying to think of where in their framework it really fits, that's probably the closest. Maybe that's probably the best scenario, largely because when you're trying to determine what action you're going to do, you could argue you're going to take a red, a gray, or a blue action. They Each of those is going to be associated with a certain type of thing that you're doing in the game, building and constructing. You're developing in-game bonuses or end-game points, or you're competing for an area control part of the board and first player, and some end of round bonuses. So those are sort of your three broadly general areas that you're working with. And there's a lot to think about in this game. This is a fairly complex game to teach. After you've played it once, it's not that hard to kind of grok how all those things fit together. But I would say mastering that well could be tough, because almost everything you do, from selecting your card to what action you choose to do even after you've picked your color, because there's usually some paths that you can select. So when I build, I can clear rubble, or I can actually build a part of the wall, or I could build a gate as opposed to a piece of the wall. And those come with variable bonuses and benefits throughout the game. It's a lot to think about. It is a lot of fun, and this one is, I think, if it's not, it's in my top 30. It's probably going to stay reasonably high, I think, in my top 100 list, because it is a very well done game with some thematic elements to it and a lot of good levers to pull in the game. So I enjoy it quite a bit, and it gets overlooked a little bit. I've heard some people say, "Well, Ezra and Nehemiah, it's like a Bible game. I don't want to mess with that." I would discourage that thought. It is not a Bible game. It just happens to have a setting that happens to be in the Bible. But when you play this game, you will not at all feel like it is a Bible game that, like something's being pushed on you or something. It's just the setting. Very good setting, and it works well with this particular game. So try it out. Find somebody who has a copy. It might, I don't know really how well sought after. I think it looked really good, and a lot of people said good things about it when it first came out, but I haven't heard about it in a while, so I'm not sure what the long term where it's going to land long term, but I do think it is quite a good one. All right, next up, I believe it is my number 6, is Elizabeth Hargrave, Mark Wooten. Elizabeth did Wingspan, and here she's done Undergrove. No, it's not Wingspan with mushrooms. It's but there's you probably get a little bit of a feel of how she does some of her engine building in games. But Undergrove is unique in that it is whereas Wingspan, I would argue, is a bird theme laid on top of an engine builder, nicely entwined, very well done. Undergrove, I think, is much more thematic gameplay wise. Your resources are going to be things that mushrooms produce: potassium, phosphorus, a couple other things. Carbon is sort of your biggest thing that you're trying to get to your tree. You're trying to absorb carbon into your tree, and you're playing character-wise as a western pine, and as you absorb carbon into your tree grows. You can grow up to 3 trees, I believe, on the board, maybe 4. I can't remember the exact number. And there's a carbon track, so anytime you absorb carbon on your turn, you're going to move up that track. Now, that could be you can only move up 1. So it doesn't matter how much carbon you absorb in your turn, you're moving 1. So I could absorb 10 in a turn, but I'm only moving 1 up on the track. And so there's a little bit of a race element to get up that track, to get be the first one to bonuses and get to the end of the track and potentially get in-game points. So you are kind of racing to grow your tree, but you're trying to put your seeds out in the forest, grow as many of those trees as you can, gather from the mushrooms, and the mushrooms all have variable powers that require resources. So there's a lot of trying to figure out what order I want to manage my resources in and how do I want to trigger things. And some of that will impact other players because of the area control element. You don't own the mushrooms that your roots touch, you just have access to them. So everybody is kind of competing for the same spots on the board, and largely it's the carbon on the mushrooms because you pay carbon to a mushroom to trigger it in many cases and gain things from it, and then that carbon can then be absorbed. So the way that you could kind of see, like I put carbon, I want to use this mushroom, I put carbon on it. Another player can then take that carbon to grow their tree, and that could be furthering their end game goals. But I need this mushroom, and so there's a lot of give and take there when it comes to the overall gameplay. But it's a pretty short game. I would say hour to 90 minutes probably with 4 players who know how to play the game. It's a little the mechanical interactions are there's a little bit of a fiddly feel to it when it comes to teaching it, but I think that's because they're a little different in how it works as compared to other games. And so this might be a little bit of a sleeper down the road. I can see people coming 2 or 3 years from now coming back to this game and recognizing, oh man, that was actually a really unique interaction of mechanics with the other players. So we'll see. We'll see. I could be very wrong about that, but that'd be my guess because it does feel a little different than a lot of the standard Euro games that I've come across. My next up is number 5. I don't actually have that game on hand. It is purchased in the mail. Well, I don't know if it's in the mail yet, but it's waiting to be shipped whenever the warehouse I bought it from gets it, and that's Lure. I apologize, I don't remember the designer's name, but I do know that it was a remake of a previous game. You're fishing, you're rolling dice. What makes this game, I think, fun is you roll the dice, and the number of dice, if the person who rolled the least number of dice will get to go first. They get to fish first. But obviously, the more dice you roll, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but in most cases, the more dice you roll, the higher your odds are of getting the numbers you need for particular fish, especially fish that require a high number, say a 25 or a 20 or something like that. And then some fish require certain numbers. So the more dice you roll, the greater your odds of getting those numbers. Lures are used as sort of mitigating factors for the dice. You're always going to start the game with a lure. Nobody knows any other player's lure. And once all the fish are out there for a given round, then people are behind their concealed area. They're picking the number of dice they're going to roll. Probably put them in your hand and then stick your hand out. And then when you say, okay, everybody reveals, lowest number of dice gets to go first. You roll your dice and you see which fish can you catch with the dice that you rolled. And you have several D6s, you have a D12, and you have a D20. So there's some choices to make there, and there's some aspects where you always get your D6s back, but your D20 and your D12, you don't have them. You lose them for a little bit when you use them, and you get them back later. But the lures are sort of the mitigating factor when it comes to the fishing. And every time you don't catch a fish, you're going to get a lure. So you could purposely not catch fish just to get lures if you were trying to incorporate a little bit of strategy into this dice game. This is a dice roller. I think it's really fun. I've heard, I think on BGA, I'm not sure if everybody who plays it is really diving into the strategy. It's one that's easy to play a couple times, and I almost played it a couple times. I was like, oh, it's just rolling dice for fish. But then as I kind of started understanding how these lures fit in and I read through the rules, I was like, no, this actually sounds pretty cool. This is what led me to go ahead and say, I really want to copy this game. It feels like a great filler. It plays super fast, like 10-15 minutes, I think, to play a full game. And I could see a lot of people really enjoying it. And it does feel a little bit thematically like fishing based on how those mechanics work. So I think that's all very nicely tied together. Number 4, and I apologize, I'm a little stuffy today because I think I came down with something over the weekend. I'm not sure what. All right, number 4. Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth. This is Seven Wonders Duel with a Lord of the Rings theme. I want to say pasted on, but I will say there's some adjustments for Lord of the Rings Duel. I feel like I definitely like that better than Seven Wonders Duel. Part of that's I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, so that helps a lot. But I do feel like the theme works really well with that concept, that game concept. Part of it being so in Seven Wonders Duel you have the sciences. In Lord of the Rings, those are the factions, and there are you need 6 to win outright. You get all 6 factions, you win the game. There's actually 7 factions. One is sort of a hidden faction that is in one of the faction, what do you call it, shield tiles that you could obtain in the game by collecting factions. And so that is gaining the 6 factions is one way to win. Another way to win is by either, if you're the Free Peoples of Middle Earth, throwing the ring in Mordor, or, which is like a chase mechanic, or catching the ring. The ring wraith catches the ring bearer, and they have this really interesting slide mechanism where you will never get further from the ring wraiths than you are. You can't get ahead of them. You can only get closer to putting it in Mordor based on the slide mechanic. And that's the blue cards. So they'd generally be point cards in Seven Wonders Duel, but in here they're just chasing the ring. And then there's the area control aspect. There's the board, and the military will gain you troops on the board into different areas. I think there's 7 different lands. And if you get presence, not control, but presence in every land, then you win the game automatically that way too. You can also get these towers, which are sort of these special cards that the symbols, which are kind of like in Seven Wonders Duel, you think like the wood, the stone, those cards that kind of build toward being able to make other cards cheaper. So you get certain of those symbols, which are Lord of the Rings themed. They're not like wood and stone. They are, like darkness or free people or symbols from clans or factions, things like that. And they can make other cards cheaper, but they can also help you get these towers out on the board, which gives you presence, and they never disappear. Once you have a tower, you have a tower. There's only one tower associated with each of the lands in Middle Earth, and only one person can get them. So that is a very if you like Lord of the Rings, highly recommend this game. I think it's absolutely fantastic. If you like Seven Wonders Duel, but you're like on Lord of the Rings, I would say try this game, see what you think. The card quality is a little lacking. I got sleeves for mine, and that I feel like is absolutely requires the sleeves. The other components are nice. The box actually is nice as far as an insert goes, but the for whatever reason the cards is just low quality. However, it is a pretty inexpensive game. I think it was like $20. So as games go, and for a game this good, I would say nice price range. Maybe it's like 30, 35 if you pay full price. You probably get on sale for 20, 25 bucks somewhere, or if you get a used copy. All right, next up we have Inventions, the Evolution of Ideas. I feel like someone might come in my house, but I'm not sure. Inventions is the most recent Vital Lacerda. I say most recent. Speakeasy was just on Kickstarter, so not the most recent, but Speakeasy not available to anybody yet. So this is the most recent available, and I thought it was going to be an overly complex game with too many mechanics moving around that seemed like it was just mechanics for mechanics' sake. But after playing this game 2 or 3 times now, and I played the solo I think once or twice, maybe more, I really enjoyed the interactions, and it really is a lot more like a Civ game to some degree. There's going to be proponents of civilization style game that probably would disagree with that. But you're putting society people out on the board, and you use your society to influence different other aspects of the game when you're building your tiles out on your. There's a little player board that you're building tiles out on, and you have to use civilization folks to. You have to exhaust them to build those tiles depending on what you're trying to do. The more things you invent, the cheaper that building those tiles can potentially be if you're building tiles associated with the types of inventions you've invented. There are just a lot of really neat interactions. It's pretty complex. It's pretty brain burning, but after you've played a game, it's not that hard to kind of wrap your mind around what is going on. And it's just probably a 3 to 4 hour engagement if you get into this game. But it is number 3 on my 2024 because it is a very good, well-designed game, and I don't know if it's his best. But this is in the ballpark of Kanban EV and the Gallerist for me. It's right up there. I like On Mars. So that's also a really high one for me. I don't know if this one's quite as heavy as On Mars, but it's probably close. Maybe even heavier. But it is a lot of fun, and once you've gotten through the rules and kind of understand everything, it's not too hard to keep up with, especially if you follow the way Ian O'Toole has laid out the design on the board and the way Lacerda's woven it all together. It works really nicely and it helps you keep up with everything. So, really great game. All right, number 2, which this could have been my number 1. Honestly, my number 1 and number 2 could probably swing both ways. But for right now, my number 2 is River of Gold. Very streamlined game. 3 actions. You're either delivering goods, you're sailing on the river, or you're building a building. Those are the 3 actions. Rinse and repeat based on the resources you have to pay. So sailing is going to get you stuff. Delivering will usually get you some influence here and there, but you're going to have to pay stuff to do that. And building a building will require you to pay money to build the building. The quicker you build, the cheaper buildings tend to be. You're going to roll a dice at the beginning of the game. It's going to be one of 6 factions. So whenever you roll the dice, whatever that number is, you can use divine influence to influence that number up and down a few. As much as you can afford, but you start the game with only I think 1 or maybe 2 divine favor. The most you can have is 3, and then there are certain customers you can deliver to that can actually increase your maximum divine favor. But this is a tight game. So if you're going to be just increasing your divine favor, you need a good reason to be doing that consistently, because you want to streamline what you're trying to do in the game, because before you know it, it's over. This game takes about an hour to play, and then it's it's done. It's very nicely designed. Seems like it was play tested very well. So I think this one's going to be high on my list for a long time. Might even be kind of an underrated game. It's hard to say yet, but this feels like the kind of game that in 3 to 4 years, it's going to be around the 3 to 400 range on BGG. And it will be like heaven and ale. Such a great game, but people just miss it for one reason or another. But yeah, that's my number 2. Moving on to my last and final, but number 1 game for this year is Unconscious Mind. I did not think this game was going to end up being quite as good as it is, but it's beautiful. It's got that vintage trade art. I got some of the card sleeves that they sold with the game when they did the Kickstarter. I don't have every single thing with the game. I didn't get the full Nightmare expansion. I actually got, unfortunately, just the cards, the dream cards, but didn't realize I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to get some extras that I thought were cool, and then I didn't realize I would need the actual character cards to go with that Nightmare expansion, because I really just wanted to play the base game, and the other stuff was extras I could add in for as little money as possible. So I'll probably add that later down the road. I didn't feel like I needed every single thing that they put in that game, but it is a really good thematic game. Being a therapist myself, I really like the idea of psychology woven into there, and it's a very good interaction of mechanics. I've played it with a couple of people now. I think everybody's liked it that I've played it with, and I am looking forward to more plays. Almost every time I finish playing, I'm like, man, I'm looking forward to playing this game again. It's one of my number one determining factors of how good is a game, is how often do I want to get it to the table again. But that is my revised top 10 for 2024. Come mid-year next year, I might be looking back at 2024 and do another update if things have changed a little bit and I've gotten enough 2024 games to the table to move the dial on some of these. But these are all good games. I can see all of these games being in my top 100 or very close. And if they don't make it, it will be, some of them will for sure, but the ones on the bottom, as the years go on, even those 100 top 100 games that fall out of my top 100 are still very good games that I enjoy being able to play fairly consistently. So thanks for joining Unraveled Game Thoughts. Until next time, enjoy gaming wherever you're doing it.